By 1965, the United States Interstate highway system had grown to over 20,000 miles, and along nearly every one of those miles sat a roadside diner with its lights on at 3 a.m. Truckers driving overnight hauls, traveling salesmen between territories, families pushing through the night to make it to a relative's house by morning. All of them found the same thing waiting at almost any exit: a counter, a row of booths, a waitress who had already been on her feet for 6 hours, and a menu built entirely around one question: what can keep a tired person going until sunrise? Most of those diners are gone now. The interstate bypassed the small towns that used to depend on through traffic. The chains moved in, and the specific food built for exhausted drivers and hungry travelers, heavy, fast, cheap, and oddly comforting, disappeared along with the diners that served it. What you are about to hear are 15 meals that define the American roadside diner at its peak. Food built for people who could not afford to linger, made by cooks who understood exactly what a tired body needed. If you have never subscribed to this channel, do it now, because these meals deserve to be remembered. We are going through all 15. Stay until the end. I have a challenge for you. Let us begin. Number 1, steak and eggs at 3 a.m. At a roadside diner in 1962, steak and eggs at 3 a.m. was not breakfast. It was fuel ordered by truckers who had been driving since midnight and still had 400 miles left to cover before their delivery window closed. A thin cut of sirloin or cube steak, seared hard and fast on a flat-top griddle that had been running all night, served alongside 2 eggs, fried in the same beef fat the steak had just left behind, hash browns on the side, pressed flat and left alone long enough to form a deep golden crust. The cook did not ask how you wanted the steak. At 3 a.m. on a roadside griddle, steak and eggs came one way, well seared, properly seasoned, and on the plate within 6 minutes of ordering. This was the meal a trucker ordered, because it was the only thing on the menu substantial enough to carry him through to his next stop, and the only thing that tasted good enough at 3 a.m. to make the stop feel worth the lost time. Truck stops still serve steak and eggs today, but the version cooked on a flat top that had been running continuously for 18 hours by a cook who knew every regular driver's usual order without asking. That specific version belonged to a diner culture that has mostly disappeared, along with the independent truck stops themselves. Number 2, the open-faced roast beef plate. A roadside diner staple throughout the 1960s, the open-faced roast beef plate consisted of thick slices of roast beef laid over white bread, covered entirely in brown beef gravy, with a scoop of mashed potatoes on the side that received its own ladle of the same gravy. The roast beef was cooked low and slow overnight in the diner's oven, ready to slice by the time the morning rush began, then kept warm in its own juices throughout the day, so that an order placed at 2 p.m. tasted just as good as one placed at 7 a.m. This was the meal a traveling salesman ordered between sales calls, eaten quickly in a booth with a road map spread open beside the plate, planning the next stop while finishing the last bite of gravy-soaked bread. The dish required almost no chewing and almost no attention. You could eat it while reading, while talking, while half paying attention to a radio playing somewhere behind the counter. It was built for people whose minds were already on the next 4 hours of driving, not on the meal in front of them. Open-faced roast beef has nearly disappeared from American diners. The labor of roasting beef overnight, every night, for a plate that's sold for next to nothing, does not survive in an industry built around speed and minimal kitchen staff. If you are enjoying this list, make sure you are subscribed before we continue. Every week we bring back meals that fed entire generations, and most people have never heard of them. Number 3, country fried steak with white gravy. Country fried steak, a tenderized cube steak, dredged in seasoned flour, fried until the coating turned deep golden, then covered in a peppery white gravy made from the same pan drippings, was the single most ordered dinner plate at roadside diners across the American South and Midwest throughout the 1960s. The steak had to be pounded thin enough to cook through quickly on a busy griddle, but not so thin that it lost all texture. The breading had to crack audibly under a fork. The white gravy made from flour, milk, and the rendered fat left in the pan after frying had to be peppery enough to cut through the richness of the fried coating. Served with mashed potatoes, green beans cooked soft with bacon fat, and a biscuit, this was the meal a long-haul driver ordered when he had finally made it to his overnight stop and had 30 uninterrupted minutes to actually sit down. Every diner along a given stretch of highway had its own version, and regular drivers developed strong opinions about whose country fried steak was worth the detour. That kind of specific hard-won loyalty to one diner's version of a common dish does not really exist in an industry now dominated by identical locations serving identical food from coast to coast. Number 4, the patty melt with hash browns. Already established at lunch counters by the 1960s, the patty melt found its way onto roadside diner menus as a late-night order. A beef patty, caramelized onions, and melted Swiss cheese pressed between buttered rye bread, griddled until both sides went dark gold, served alongside a mound of hash browns instead of fries. The hash browns mattered as much as the sandwich itself at a roadside diner. Properly made, they required a griddle hot enough to crisp the exterior without burning it, and a cook patient enough to let them sit undisturbed for several minutes before flipping. Patience that was in short supply during a packed dinner rush, but available again once the overnight crowd thinned out. This was the order a traveler made around midnight, when a full dinner felt unnecessary, but a basic sandwich felt insufficient for the hours of driving still ahead. The combination of melted cheese, caramelized onion, and crisp hash browns hit a specific register that nothing lighter could match. The diner patty melt, served with hash browns rather than fries, is a regional and era-specific variation that has mostly disappeared. Most restaurants serving a patty melt today default to fries, having lost the specific late-night logic that paired it with hash browns instead. Number 5, liver and onions, diner style. Roadside diners served liver and onions as a dinner special at least once a week, almost without exception, because it was inexpensive, filling, and appealed strongly to an older generation of travelers who had grown up eating it regularly at home. Thin slices of beef liver, dredged in flour, fried quickly on the griddle, topped with onions that had been cooking low and slow on the back of the same griddle since the start of the dinner shift, soft and deeply caramelized by the time they were needed. Served with mashed potatoes and a vegetable, usually green beans or peas, This was a meal ordered specifically. Drivers and travelers who wanted it sought it out, often calling ahead or asking other drivers over the radio which diner had liver and onions on the menu that particular night. The dish required a cook willing to keep liver in stock and prepare it properly, despite it being a less popular order among younger customers. As diners modernized their menus through the 1970s and 1980s, chasing broader appeal, liver and onions was frequently one of the first dishes cut. Too specific, too polarizing, too tied to a generation that was driving less every year. Number 6, the lumberjack breakfast. Built for drivers and workers who needed enough fuel to last an entire shift without stopping again. The lumberjack breakfast at a roadside diner combined eggs, bacon, sausage, ham, hash browns, and a stack of pancakes or French toast, all on a single oversized plate. The point of the lumberjack breakfast was volume and variety. A driver uncertain how long it would be until his next real meal. Ordered this specifically because it covered every base. Protein from 3 different sources, starch from both potatoes and griddle bread, enough calories to genuinely last through an entire day if necessary. Diners that offered this breakfast often had a standing challenge associated with it. Finish the entire plate within a set time, and the meal was free, a promotion that drew curious customers and created a small, specific kind of local fame for whichever driver had managed it. The lumberjack breakfast required a kitchen capable of cooking 5 different proteins simultaneously during a busy morning rush, coordinated so that everything arrived hot and finished at the same moment. That level of short order coordination on a plate sold for very little profit margin has become increasingly rare as diner kitchens shrank and simplified. Number 7, chili with crackers and raw onion. Roadside diner chili in the 1960s was built to be inexpensive, filling and capable of sitting in a pot on the back of the stove for hours without losing quality. Ground beef, kidney beans, tomatoes, chili powder, and cumin simmered low and slow throughout an entire shift. Served in a thick ceramic bowl with a sleeve of saltine crackers and a small dish of raw diced onion on the side. This was the order a traveler made when money was tight, or time was tighter. A meal that could be eaten in under 10 minutes without requiring much chewing or much attention. The chili pot was a fixture of the diner kitchen, started fresh each morning, and never quite finished by closing, the flavor deepening throughout the day as it continued to simmer. Regular customers learned to ask what time the chili had been started, knowing that a pot that had been simmering since 6 in the morning tasted noticeably better than one started at noon. Diner chili, made this way and kept simmering all day, rather than prepared in single batches to order, has largely disappeared as health codes and kitchen efficiency standards changed how restaurants are required to hold and serve food over long periods. Number 8, the Reuben on the griddle. A roadside diner. Reuben sandwich took corned beef, sauerkraut, Swiss cheese, and Russian dressing between slices of rye bread. But unlike the deli version, the entire sandwich was pressed directly on the diner's flat-top griddle rather than grilled in a pan, which gave it a wider, flatter shape and a more deeply caramelized crust on both sides. The corned beef was usually sourced pre-cooked and reheated quickly on the griddle's edge. The sauerkraut drained well to avoid making the bread soggy, and the Russian dressing applied just before the sandwich went together, so it did not have time to soften the bread before cooking. This was an order made by travelers who wanted something more substantial than a basic sandwich, but did not want a full sit-down dinner, a meal eaten quickly at the counter, often paired with a side of fries that had been cooking in the same fryer that handled the diner's onion rings and chicken fried steak. The griddle press diner Reuben, distinct from its deli cousin, required a flat top large enough and consistently hot enough to handle a sandwich this size without burning the bread before the cheese melted through. As diner griddles shrank in newer, smaller footprint restaurants, this specific preparation became harder to replicate. Number 9. The Truckers Club Sandwich. A roadside diner club sandwich differed from its lunch counter cousin in one key way: portion size. Built specifically with truckers in mind, the diner version used 4 slices of toast instead of 3, doubling the turkey, bacon, and lettuce inside, designed explicitly to satisfy a driver who needed a meal, substantial enough to skip the next stop entirely. Cut into quarters and held together with toothpicks, this sandwich appeared on menus specifically marketed toward truckers, sometimes advertised on roadside signage as the Truckers Club or the Driver's Special, a direct acknowledgement of who the diner expected to order it. The extra size meant the sandwich took longer to assemble and required a cook confident enough to stack 4 layers without the whole thing collapsing when cut. Regular truckers came to know which diners made the version worth the extra few minutes of wait. As trucking routes shifted toward interstate travel plazas with fast food franchises built specifically for quick turnaround, the oversized diner club sandwich, built for truckers by name, requiring real assembly time, largely disappeared, replaced by pre-made sandwiches designed for speed rather than substance. Number 10, beef stew with buttered bread. Roadside diner beef stew in the 1960s was a thick, dark stew built from beef chuck, potatoes, carrots, and onions, simmered for hours on the back burner, served in a deep bowl alongside a thick slice of white bread, buttered generously and meant for soaking up whatever stew remained at the bottom of the bowl. This was a cold weather order, requested most often during winter months, when a driver had been on the road through freezing overnight temperatures and needed something that warmed from the inside rather than simply filled the stomach. The stew, like the diner's chili, benefited from being held and simmered throughout the day, rather than made fresh for each order, the meat growing more tender and the broth growing richer with every passing hour. It sat on low heat. Diners along northern routes, through Pennsylvania, Ohio, the upper Midwest, were particularly known for their beef stew, and truckers running winter routes through those states would specifically plan their stops around diners known to have a good pot going. That kind of route planning loyalty, built around a specific bowl of stew at a specific diner, belongs to an era of trucking that has mostly given way to standardized truck stop chains. Number 11, the hot turkey sandwich, diner style. Similar in spirit to the version served at Howard Johnson's and other restaurant chains of the era, the roadside diner's hot turkey sandwich used sliced turkey breast over white bread, covered entirely in gravy, served with mashed potatoes that received their own ladle of gravy on the side. What distinguished the diner version was its reliability as a Thanksgiving-style comfort meal available any day of the year, ordered by travelers who found themselves far from home and craving something that tasted like a holiday dinner, even in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday in July. The turkey was typically roasted in larger batches once or twice a week, rather than daily, sliced thin and kept in broth to stay moist until needed, a practical kitchen solution that meant the dish was always available without requiring a fresh turkey roast every single day. This was the meal travelers specifically sought out when feeling homesick on the road, a plate that offered something close to a home-cooked Sunday dinner, regardless of the day or the season. As diners closed and the practice of roasting whole turkeys in-house became rarer, this specific kind of comfort, available any day, tasting like a holiday, became much harder to find along American highways. Number 12, apple pie warmed with cheddar. An unusual but once common pairing at roadside diners throughout the Midwest and parts of New England, apple pie was served warm with a slice of sharp cheddar cheese laid directly on top, melting slightly from the heat of the pie beneath it. The combination divided customers sharply. Some considered it the only correct way to eat apple pie. Others found the idea of cheese on dessert strange and avoided it entirely. Diners that served this way typically asked customers directly whether they wanted the cheese, having learned through experience that assuming either preference risked an unhappy customer. For the travelers who favored it, the combination worked through contrast, the sharpness and saltiness of the cheddar cutting through the sweetness of the warm apple filling, similar in principle to the way a savory cheese pairs with a sweet wine. This pairing has almost entirely disappeared from American diners and restaurants generally, surviving today mostly as a curiosity mentioned in articles about old regional food customs, rather than as something travelers can actually order. The diners that served it without a second thought, simply because that was how apple pie had always been served there, have mostly closed. Number 13, the Western omelet plate. A roadside diner staple available at any hour. The Western omelet combined diced ham, green bell pepper, and onion folded into beaten eggs, cooked on the griddle until set, served alongside hash browns and white toast. Unlike a delicate French omelet requiring careful technique, the diner Western omelet was built for speed and reliability on a busy griddle, the filling pre-chopped and kept ready in small containers near the cook station, the eggs poured directly onto the hot surface and folded once the edges set, an entire plate assembled and on the counter within 4 minutes of the order being called. This was the meal a traveler ordered at almost any hour, breakfast, lunch, or deep into the night, because diners kept the ingredients on hand, around the clock specifically, to accommodate drivers whose schedules did not follow normal meal times. The Western omelet still exists on diner menus today, but the version built for true around-the-clock availability, pre-chopped fillings ready at 3 a.m, just as readily as at 8, prepared by a cook who had made hundreds of them that week alone, belonged to a 24-hour diner culture that has become increasingly rare as fewer diners stay open through the entire night. Number 14, navy bean soup with ham. A roadside diner staple, particularly common at diners located along routes through the mid-Atlantic and South. Navy bean soup with ham was simmered for hours from dried beans, a ham bone, onion, and celery, served thick and hearty alongside cornbread or a dinner roll. This soup represented the diner's answer to using every part of the ham that had been served as a dinner special days earlier, the bone going into the soup pot once the meat had been carved away. Nothing wasted, the marrow slowly enriching the broth over hours of low simmering. Truckers running long hauls through cold weather favored this soup specifically for how filling and inexpensive it was, often ordering a bowl as a starter before a full dinner plate, treating it almost as an appetizer despite its substantial nature. The practice of working a diner's entire ham bone supply into a recurring soup special, planned around what dinner specials had been served days prior, required a kind of kitchen planning and waste-conscious cooking that does not fit easily into modern supply chains built around pre-portioned, pre-packaged ingredients delivered fresh rather than used in sequence. Number 15. Coconut cream pie from the diner case. No roadside diner of the 1960s was considered complete without a rotating glass pie case near the front register, and coconut cream pie was almost always among the most popular slices in that case. A thick vanilla custard base studded with shredded coconut, topped with whipped cream, and a final dusting of toasted coconut flakes. The pie was made fresh each morning, before the breakfast rush began, by a baker who often worked alone in the diner's small kitchen, hours before any other staff arrived. By midday, the case displayed several pies in various states of being sold down to their last slices, a visual record of which flavors travelers had favored that particular day. A slice of coconut cream pie, eaten at the counter with a cup of coffee, was the specific way many travelers chose to end a meal before getting back on the road. Not a heavy dessert, but a sweet, rich finish that paired well with strong diner coffee and did not weigh down a driver who still had hours of driving ahead. The rotating glass pie case itself, displaying several fresh-baked pies made that same morning by a single baker working before dawn, has become one of the rarest sights in American dining. Most restaurants today source desserts pre-made from commercial bakeries, rather than maintaining the daily labor of an in-house pie baker, and the coconut cream pie that case once held disappeared along with that specific kind of diner labor. 15 meals, 15 things built specifically for people who could not afford to stop moving for long. Not delicate food, not food built to impress. Food built around a single practical question. What does a tired body need right now? Answered the same way at diners across the entire country, by cooks and bakers and waitresses who understood the specific rhythm of overnight highway travel better than almost anyone. We did not just lose the diners. We lost the specific knowledge of how to feed someone who has been driving since midnight, how to keep a chili pot simmering all day without losing quality, how to make a pie before dawn so it would be ready by the time the first travelers walked through the door. That knowledge belonged to a version of American travel that moved slower, stopped more often, and depended on small, independent kitchens scattered across every highway in the country. Most of those kitchens are gone now. Here is my challenge. This week, make one of these at home. Country fried steak with white gravy, a proper Western omelet, coconut cream pie, if you are feeling ambitious. And then come back here and tell me in the comments, did you ever eat at a roadside diner like this, and which dish do you remember most? I read every single comment. The vanished kitchen. Some flavors deserve to be remembered.